When you get success, you don't go back to failure. Some advice to all of those who want to go back to the ghetto.
Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book The Man Crisis comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today.
I don't know what's wrong with these black entertainers these days, because many of them, like the late rapper Takeoff and his uncle Quevo, and actresses like Mowry, want to go back to the ghetto and ghetto culture. Now, as a guy who grew up in the South Bronx, in poverty, on Park Avenue, across the street from the Metro North Railroad tracks, I always worked to get out of the ghetto. But it seems like these prominent black celebrities, they want to come back to the hood and hood culture and believe that this is a positive thing, when people like myself who live there know that you're not going back to anything but a sewer. Now, in the case of the late rapper Takeoff and his uncle Quevo, they decided to go to a party that was sponsored by a guy from the 5th Ward in Houston, and they also took a trip right down to that same 5th Ward, one of the most notorious ghettos here in the United States. Now, what's really troubling to me is that your Takeoff and your Quevo, these were black men who came from the Atlanta suburbs, and they had gotten the success to the point where they were worth over $26 million apiece, but they had to go bring themselves down to the hood of the 5th Ward in order to check in with guys from the streets in an effort to go out here and call themselves getting some street cred. Now, that's really troubling to me, because if you're worth over $26 million apiece, why are you going down to a party hosted by a hood guy at a bowling alley, and then going to the same said party and standing and watching a dice game? I mean, if you're worth over $26 million, you don't want to go out here and be in these kind of spots. But what we have with many of these suburban black guys is that they want to go down to the hood in an effort to keep it real, not understanding the reality of those streets, and they don't even know how to move in those streets, because that's basically sadly what happened to lead to the death of rapper Takeoff, him and his uncle Quevo going down to the hood in the 5th Ward of Houston, then going to the party at this bowling alley and standing there watching a dice game, which mostly hood guys who are extremely desperate go out here and play. And as they're playing this dice, what happens usually is that people get emotional, and they use this as a way to segue into setting somebody up to going into an argument, and that's what happened to sadly lead to the death of rapper Takeoff, who was an innocent bystander watching this dice game, but not knowing what to do when things got dicey, because he didn't know how to move in those streets of Houston in the 5th Ward, or even in the city of Houston when you're dealing with hood dudes. Because he didn't know how to go out here and move in these streets, and he was misled by an uncle who was out here looking to try to call himself being real in these streets. What happened is that we no longer have Migos rapper Takeoff with us anymore, and sadly that's all because we have black folks who think that they have to keep it real by going into the streets where they know nothing about, and going into those streets believing that if they go here they'll get street cred, even though most of their audience are white folks and non-black folks. They want to go to the worst parts of the ghetto that people like myself aspire to get out of, because people who come from that ghetto, like rappers like Jay-Z, they know, hey, I'm working to get out of here, and once I get out of here, I'm not ever coming back here. However, we've got these suburban guys who want to come down to the hood, not understanding what the hood is about, not knowing what the streets of the hood are like, but they want to come down because they believe that it's going to add to their street cred, not understanding that the danger that they're putting themselves in, not understanding that this is a place people don't want to go down here to stay. No, once people start getting their papers straight, that's when they start getting out of the ghetto, and they never ever want to return to the ghetto. I mean, I myself grew up in the South Bronx, again, in that 167th Street and Park Avenue, across the street from the Metro North Railroad. And while I took one last trip down there in 2018, I'm never going back to that neighborhood because I know how dangerous that neighborhood is. I mean, recently I saw on the news a couple of years ago, a guy went down there for an online date to that exact same area where I used to live, and he got himself robbed. And I also posted a video about the other building I lived in and how rough that neighborhood was. And down the block from that building is a place called the Concourse Jamaican Bakery, where they make some awesome Jamaican beef patties, but I'm not getting on a bus to go down there because that neighborhood has changed for the worse, and it's a whole lot worse than it was before. So even though I love me some Concourse Jamaican beef patties, I'm not going over there because I know how dangerous those streets are. And even though I know how to move in them, I know it's time to move on, and it's time to move to better things. But sadly, we have many of these rappers like your Takeoff and your Quevo who don't understand how blessed they are, and because they take their lives for granted, they go down to the hood thinking that, oh, I'm experiencing something that is authentic and real. No, the reality is that those of us who lived in that ghetto, once we can go out here and rub two nickels together and get our money straight, we are gone and we ain't coming back. I mean, if I had a full-time job and I was making paper like I really wanted to, I would be, again, have my own place far, far away from any part of the Bronx, because I know how dangerous the Bronx is and how dangerous many of these neighborhoods are. But sadly, we've got many of these black entertainers who never experienced how hard life is here in places like the Bronx, but they want to go down to these neighborhoods thinking that they're going to go add to their street credit, not understanding that going down to those neighborhoods is a thing that can lead to you winding up in a body bag. That's what they don't really understand about these streets. That's what they don't understand about neighborhoods like the South Bronx or Houston's Fifth Ward. For them, it's about trying to go out here and build a so-called reputation as related to being so-called real, but the reality is these guys are so green, they don't even know how to move in these streets, and these guys are sitting up here talking about selling drugs and talking about crime. No, most of the brothers out here, if they can and get somewhere and find a way to get a job and make some money, they're not talking about selling drugs. No, they're talking about getting themselves some work and working towards getting out of the ghetto, and they're talking about trying to get out here and move their lives forward. That's what black men in the ghetto are talking about. We're not talking about trap houses. We're not talking about selling dope. No, we saw a lot of that lead to a lot of these men winding up going to prison, winding up in body bags, and we don't see it as entertainment, because when you live in a neighborhood where you saw people basically killing themselves with crack cocaine like I did in the late 80s, and you saw neighborhoods deteriorate from addicts basically walking around like living zombies, like I talk about in my novel Spellbound, or you see people just basically out here just shooting and selling poison to each other. That's not something we consider to be entertainment, because back when I was out here and the rap game was going on, people weren't rapping about crime. No, they were rapping about something more positive, and they were rapping about rocking the party, because the rap game was about, again, having a release from all of the stress and the tension, and it was all about making something positive so that we could go out here and present something to empower other people. But you got guys from the suburbs, they want to come out here and go out here and buy into the white supremacist idea of the hood, go out here and buy into the white supremacist idea of the streets, and then tell you that this is real, when the reality they're presenting isn't anything most people who live in the Bronx or any ghetto neighborhood want to aspire to. And when we get opportunities, we try to go out here and make the most of those opportunities, trying our best to avoid the crabs in a barrel who go out here and take the lives of people like rapper Takeoff, because those individuals are jealous of any black person with success. Now, the other person who seems to want to go back to the ghetto is your actress Tia Mowry. And while I have gone out here and castigated your Tia Mowry as related to her divorce in previous videos, I have to call her out because she's out here promoting dysfunction to the sisters in the form of going out here and glorifying single motherhood. Now, your Tia Mowry had been married to actor Corey Hardick for 14 years, and abruptly she just decides to go out here and divorce her husband in the quest to find so-called happiness and to so-called love herself. And as she's out here talking about her so-called happiness and loving herself, she is out here promoting the idea that single motherhood is something black women go out here and aspire to. Now, as somebody who has lived in the Bronx for all of his life, I can tell you most black women do not aspire to be single mothers, and most women out here, if they were in Tia Mowry's place, they would, if they had a successful marriage like she claims to have, they're not going to go out here and abruptly end that marriage. No, they're going to sit there and stay with their husband because they're going to appreciate being blessed with a husband, because many of the single mothers here in the South Bronx, they go out here and they drop the skid mark draws for one of these guys in the hopes of keeping one of these guys, or in an effort to create a covert contract where they believe that this man will commit to them. And usually that what happens is they wind up getting pregnant, and eventually they wind up becoming single mothers. Or they just get in with a guy and they drop the draws for the guy, and he puts the carbon rod in the atomic waste reactor, and 9 months later there's a kid out of nowhere. And many of those women, they wind up with a baby daddy who is non-committal. So when you have your Tia Mowry out here celebrating single motherhood, it just shows how backwards she is, because she's sitting here celebrating something that's just ghetto culture, because most women do not in the South Bronx and other inner city areas, they don't aspire to be single moms. No, they wind up becoming single moms because they get involved with a guy who they either want to make a commitment to them, or a guy who just on a fluke they wind up getting pregnant by. And a lot of those women, if they had the choice to go out here and be married for 14 years, many of those sisters would love to have been in a marriage to a good man, and they would have loved to have had a man to go out here and be committed to them. But your Tia Mowry, she doesn't appreciate how she's been blessed by the Most High with a good husband. No, she wants to go out here and call her marriage a success by going out here and ending said marriage, and then talking about how she's eager to be a single mom. No black woman out here wants to be a single mom. No, most black women want to be married, but they wind up becoming baby mamas because they get no real guidance from their mothers. And what's troubling is that your Tia Mowry wound up getting good guidance from her mother and her father. But instead of her going out here and promoting positive values to the sisters, she's out here celebrating single motherhood and talking about how she's eager to go out here and be this single mom, allegedly. And again, if you're sitting here talking about single motherhood, that's again part of ghetto culture, and that's not something people want to celebrate or promote. But we've got black entertainers out here talking about dysfunctional behavior that people who live in the inner city, this is something we aspire not to be like. This is something we aspire not to do. This is something we aspire not to go out here and be about. No, if you have come from the ghetto, if you've come from neighborhoods like I have, like the South Bronx, you're not looking to go out here and have the mother of your children go out here and be a single mom. No, you want your kids to go out here and have their father in their life. You want their father to be in that home. You want that father there to go out here and show your son an example of manhood and show your daughters the kind of man that would be the best partner possibly for them in the future by their model of manhood and their example of manhood. But your Tia Mowry doesn't care about that. All she is about her feelings and her so-called happiness, not understanding that the so-called happiness she's so-called pursuing as a so-called single mom is the so-called misery that many sisters wind up living in here in neighborhoods like the South Bronx, which is the single mother capital of the world, where many of these women spend most of their time struggling on jobs for 12 to 14 hours. And then as they're coming home from working 12 to 14 hours, they're dealing with baby mama drama from the baby daddy, who basically is not active in these kids' lives. But we have your Tia Mowry marching towards single motherhood, and that just shows how dysfunctional these black entertainers are. You're walking towards the things that brothers and sisters who live in neighborhoods like Houston's Fifth Ward and the South Bronx are walking away from. In fact, I wouldn't even say we're walking away from it. No, we're running away from it because we lived in it. We know what this is, but we got entertainers going out here today talking about how they want to go down to these places, and it just shows me how backwards many of these black entertainers are, and it also shows me how many of these suburban blacks basically take their lives for granted, because many of these suburban blacks, they have never really experienced poverty like I have, living in a building like a 3430 Park Avenue back in the day where they had absolutely no heat, and you're sitting in the kitchen in front of an oven trying to stay warm for most of the day, or going and being in a place sometimes where there's no hot water, so you can't even wash it. You have to boil water to wash yourself. I mean, these people are sitting up there talking about how they want to come down to the poverty level. Then they're talking about how this is so-called real, when in reality many of these people had lives that if I was a kid and I had to live that life, I would be eager to go out here and live that life and be happy to be content with what I have been blessed with. But again, when you've got black entertainers, they are out here talking about they want to go out here and to live a life that nobody wants to live, and going out here promoting lifestyles that most black folks don't want to be a part of. And that's what's so dysfunctional as related to the late rapper Takeoff and his uncle Quevo and your actress Tia Mowry. Again, they're out here running to the ghetto, running to ghetto culture, running to a ghetto way of life that their parents walked away from. And when their parents had two nickels to rub together, they tried to give them a better life. But these people are going back to that life, to the lifestyle many ran from, and they're sitting up there talking about how they're celebrating it. And again, it just shows how dysfunctional these black celebrities are. And what's really troubling to me is that these black celebrities, they don't see how their behavior influences other people, because you got other brothers and sisters out here who are sitting up there listening to these celebrities, romanticizing these dysfunctional ideas and promoting dysfunction as perfectly normal. And many of these white supremacist media platforms, they will sit there and promote their ideas and amplify them and make them look like they're perfectly fine, and make you think that this is perfectly fine. And again, this is just completely insane. I mean, when I listen to your Tia Mowry talking about she's always in survival mode as a newly single mom, again, complete bullshit as I see it. And it's bullshit because you've never really been in real survival mode like I have been in, where you're living off basically $60 a month, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to make that money last 30 days, or how many mothers out here in the South Bronx live, where if the child support check don't come, or the money don't, or the welfare money don't come, you don't know how you're going to make those bills get paid, and you don't know how you're going to go out here and take care of yourself. I mean, you have your Tia Mowry again talking about survival mode, and again, you don't know what survival mode is. You've lived in the military and lived very well. You've lived very well in Hollywood. You don't know what survival mode is, but you're promoting single motherhood and romanticizing those narratives. Again, completely backwards as related to these black entertainers. And again, these black entertainers sitting here trying to promote ghetto culture and ghetto lifestyles as socially acceptable, but showing us how they just really don't understand what it means to be black, and don't understand that black people who went through these hard times, once we go out here and get paper like them, we're not thinking about going back to the hood. No, we're thinking about moving forward. And it's sad that once these people go out here and reach the top, the first place they want to go is straight back to the bottom. Now, if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Eastdeem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many black women can't find a husband and why 70% of black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.